The Broncos deciding to move on from head coach Vance Joseph on Monday, and now names are starting to surface as to who the Broncos could be looking at for their next head coach. Hello, and thank you for joining us here in the Broncos Media Center. I'm Phil Milani alongside Matt Boyer and Steve Atwater. Guys, a tough day around the league. 8 head coaching vacancies now open around the NFL, including the Broncos. Matt, names are starting to surface as who the Broncos might be looking at. Who's at the top of your list?
So right now we've got a couple of reports out there saying Vic Fangio, the DC from the Bears, he's going to be interviewed by the Broncos. Brian Flores, the New England defensive coordinator, also a request to interview him has been issued. And then Mike Munchak, the offensive line coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, former head coach for the Tennessee Titans. This is a very unique list, though, because these are guys that have very different resumes. Fangio, a defensive coordinator, never been a head coach. Flores, just a one-year DC, never been a head coach. And then Munchak, a head coach, but he's been an offensive line coach for quite a bit. So Steve, all of these guys bring different things to the table.
Yeah, they bring different things to the table, but in terms of experience, I would say Mike Munchak, out of that group of three coaches there, potential coaches, I think gives you the most bang for your buck. They got the experience. He was a former player, actual Pro Football Hall of Famer. I think he comes into the building with instant credibility. And one of the most important things, I think, with any coach that we bring in here, he's got to have the respect of the players, and the players got to believe that he can lead them to the promised land. And I think Mike Munchak fills that role perfectly.
Joe Ellis and John Elway had their end-of-season press conference today. John Elway said that the two things he was looking for from a head coach was experience in the league and also being great at what he does. A little bit of balance there is interesting because Vic Fangio, great at what he does. The Bears have the top defense in the NFL, but he doesn't have that experience as a head coach.
Well, no, and he's worked with some of the best. You just mentioned the Bears. I mean, Khalil Mack is a guy who we've all seen really develop in the NFL. He's worked with Ray Lewis, both Harbaugh brothers. He's worked for Dom Capers, John Fox. He's worked for some of the best defensive minds. Now, does that mean that he could possibly give offensive play calling duties to somebody like a Gary Kubiak or somebody like who has that high offensive IQ, Steve? Do you think that would work?
Well, anything's possible,
right.
But I think we'd be kind of in the same situation we were with Coach Joseph in terms of really having the offense being controlled by someone else. I think this next head coach is going to have a good feel for the offensive side of the ball as well, and have some creative ways of implementing the RPOs and all the motions before the play and during the play that makes it so difficult on defenses. I think that John is looking to hire someone who has a good feel for that, and again, how to move this offense forward quickly.
Yeah, first-time head coach. It would be interesting to see if they went that route again. Like you mentioned, Steve, going through a similar process as you do with Vance Joseph. Guys, let's talk about maybe some former head coaches who are out there. Guys like Bruce Arians, Mike McCarthy, Chuck Pagano. What about some of those names?
I like Chuck Pagano a lot just because of his Colorado ties. I think the two guys that you mentioned before, though, Arians and McCarthy, are both qualified. But Pagano does bring an interesting wrinkle because he has so much familiarity with that Colorado community, having grown up just outside of Boulder. I think that it's very interesting to get a Colorado guy, an instant credibility with the fan base, but the guys that Phil just mentioned, Steve, are also very qualified.
Yeah, they are very qualified. I think you can't go wrong with either of those guys. The only issue is there are 8 teams out here looking for head coaches, and with our situation, we don't have our quarterback situation 100% squared away for the next 4 or 5 years, whereas a situation like the Cleveland Browns just had the number 1 pick in the draft last year, and they drafted Baker Mayfield. They have a young guy that they can mold and kind of build their system around. With Case Keenum, he's had a decent year, wasn't a great year, but I think the Broncos are looking to add another quarterback here the next year or two, and I'm just not sure if it's as appealing to an older veteran coach who's had that experience to come into a situation where he has to really, really work and almost like a start over.
Yeah. Joe Ellis and John Elway, I thought was interesting. They both mentioned the fact that the expectations are not changing. So for a new coach to come in and start and kind of learn on the job, I don't think that's a possibility here. I think the expectation still is to win right away.
Yeah, John Elway said that the right guy will welcome those expectations, and he wants to you look forward to that pressure of playing here in Denver. 8 head coaching vacancies, that's the most since 2013.
Yeah.
What about wooing a guy from college, a Lincoln Riley or a David Shaw? What about somebody like that? You think that would work?
Shaw's obviously the hot name because of his Stanford ties. John Elway, of course, having a great history with that university. Lincoln Riley, though, is an interesting name because we've heard a lot about offensive coordinators in the league going down to Norman, learning those RPO schemes that Steve just mentioned. I think he's a very, very interesting name because the league is changing so much, Steve.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just not sold on a college quarterback. You know, the college and the NFL is so different, not only in the teams that you face, but just look at the structure. In the NFL, guys are making money most of the time. Most of the guys on your team are making more money than the coach, whereas in college, guys are playing, scrapping, trying to get to the NFL. It takes a different method of coaching and a way of reaching players who have already kind of maximize their potential in terms of their college potential to go to the next level.
Yeah, motivating the guys is going to be the biggest thing, I think, if a college guy comes up to the NFL. Haven't seen a ton of success from some of those guys. Bill O'Brien comes to mind most recently here.
Pete Carroll.
But
he was already an NFL head coach at that point.
And Mark Helfrich, the OC up in Chicago, having a lot of success this season. We can name a few guys who we don't think will be coming in here. John Elway said Mike Shanahan, Adam Gase, most likely not coming in here. And also the possibility of a trade. Elway said he'd be open to that, but guys, like to get a John Harbaugh giving up the 10th pick, I don't think that's in the cards.
As much, and you know me, I love the Harbaugh family.
Michigan guy,
I know, I love the Harbaugh family.
John Harbaugh.
I know. Hey, it doesn't matter. I take either one of them. But you can't. But with the position that the Broncos are in, you can't do it because John Elway mentioned it in his press conference. When you draft this high, last year it was 5th. This year it's going to be 10th. You can't afford to miss on drafts like this when you draft this high. Now, we saw the Broncos hit on a number of their picks in 2018 and really reap the benefits. But, Steve, you can't waste a number 1, a 2. You just can't waste high draft picks.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Harbaugh would be a great get. I'm not sure if he's even going to sign that deal with the Ravens. They put it out there for him. But, yeah, if he becomes available, if he is available, I would be very interested to, have a meeting with him and sit down and talk to him. But, again, that price of a first-round draft pick, the 10th pick in the draft, man, that's a steep price.
It is. And John Elway said, look, whatever decision we end up making, we hope this guy's here for 10 years. They want to get this coaching decision right. The other thing that happened on Monday was the Broncos locker room clean-out, talking to the players as they packed up, getting ready for the offseason. And we heard some interesting things coming from the guys, talking about a lot of changes coming this offseason with free agents. Chris Harris Jr. even said that he expected to be a tidal wave.
Yeah, well, I can expect that. I mean, when you have a winning season, you have turnover. Maybe 10, 15% of the team turns over. But when you have 2 back-to-back losing seasons, you can expect the turnover rate to be 25% plus. With the salary caps and contracts the way that they're structured, you can't just make wholesale changes. You can't get rid of everybody on the roster, but it's going to be a lot of new faces in the locker room come 2019 season.
I can't remember a time where players have been so open about, what they want to do or what could happen. We heard from Shaq Barrett today. Him saying, I want to be able to start. It's going to be hard for me to come back to the Broncos, but I love it so much here that, maybe something could be worked out. I think that also Domata Peko an interesting name to keep in mind because he said when he was leaving the locker room, much love, guys. I love being here. He's like, hopefully I'll see you next year.
Yeah.
You just don't know with how much money that the Broncos have to play with in free agency, how it could all shake out.
Even Emmanuel Sanders and Chris Harris Jr. saying, look, we want to be here, but they even said maybe it might not be in the cards. So it'll be interesting to see with so many looming changes over the team right now. Guys, back to the head coaching search. They want to keep it to 3 or 4. Elway said there's a sense of urgency. When do you think we'll name the next head coach?
Well, ideally, it would be in the next week or two. But for me, this is a long-term decision. And I'm sorry, not just for me, but for the organization. This is an extremely long-term decision. We're hoping that the next coach will be here for 10-plus years. So if we have to wait a month and a half, I'm fine waiting. We just got to get the right guy.
John Elway said something very interesting in his press conference. He said, hey, look, we're only a couple hours removed from Vance Joseph being the head coach here. Give us some time. This needs to be a well thought out process. Like Steve just mentioned, I think that finding the right guy is going to be very important. And who knows, the names that we've talked about here today, I mean, somebody else could emerge in the next day or two who could really set himself apart and maybe be that guy.
The other interesting thing, Joe Ellis saying, let's get Elway and that candidate in a room together just by themselves. They can feel it out and come out with the right guy.
Talking football.
Exactly.
Yeah, well,
exactly.
John, he does a great job of reading people.
Exactly.
Person in the room, face to face with them. His BS meter, he's got a good gauge on it. Yeah,
exactly.
he knows. Yeah.
And continuity was a big word. They're looking for continuity, and they want this head coach to be here for a long time. All right, that's going to do it. A lot of news coming from UC Health Training Center on Monday. For Steve Atwater, Matt Boyer, I'm Phil Milani.